from the 12 tribes, only one of the first generation of the 12 tribes of Jacob, wandering in the desert to see the promised land. Just him. Not even Moses crossed into the promised land. No other first generation tribe went into the promised land who were sons of Jacob except Joshua of Ephraim. And supposedly he's got Esau, Edom, crossing over with him, leading the entire second generation into the promised land. But the only son of Jacob, the only one of the 12 tribes would be Ephraim, represented with Joshua. And this is how important this guy is. Okay, this is how important he is. He got into the promised land that Moses didn't even get into, but somehow, well, his genealogy somehow got lost. Does that sound right to you? Hi, and welcome to our Bible study channel.
Energy. Energy. You cannot fuck with this. Energy. You cannot fuck with this energy. Love to do those in the flesh. All of those who are listening. Don't miss the message, judging me. You cannot fuck with this energy. Energy.
These are videos that go pretty in depth. First thing you should probably do is pause and read our 12 rules for reading biblical text. And if you don't like the 12 rules or you don't understand the 12 rules, well, I don't have time to explain them all. Go back to the book that I wrote and uploaded on this channel, which takes you through the entire arc and how we made these quote-unquote 12 rules as a framework of what we found after 7 years digging meticulously and carefully through the text. So if you're confused, go do that. If I refer back, well, that's probably because we actually post these things in order. So they're all done in series. And if you jump in at the middle of a series without any schema or background knowledge, and you get all pissed off, well, that's also not our problem. This is a group where we go line by line, scroll by scroll through the text. Warning, we are not language sensitive, so if you can't handle some cussing, it's not the place for you. We also do not endorse nor approve of pretty much any mainstream theology. So if you're looking for that, also definitely not the place for you. We do a video about the characters that we use in our Bible study series. And the reason we do this is sort of so that they can kind of get in your head. So we do have a video explaining why we chose the people we chose and how their sort of energy characteristics go along with the biblical characters to modernize it for people so they know what the heck we're reading. Clearly, the Roman Church was not doing their job and looking for the lost sheep of the reunited House of David. So that's what we're doing, okay? We're taking that away from them because they screwed it up. The brilliant rabbis also down there in Babylon are also not looking for the lost sheep of the reunited kingdom of David. So you're not going to hear, let's follow Rome. And you're not going to hear, let's follow the rabbis on this channel. Because, you know, sorry, not sorry, but the Bible wasn't actually written for the corrupt Levitical priesthood post-Babylon and Persia to read it through their little janky books. And it also wasn't written to be read through the eyes of pagan 4th century church fathers. So we're not doing that either. You guys can both have a seat. Oddly enough, the Bible also wasn't written to be read through the eyes of some dumbass scholars with pieces of paper that say they're smarter than everyone, but have never seen a Davidic covenant in their life. Not written for them either. You know who it's written for? It's written for the reunited house of David, who are actually in covenant and are actually the sheep. That's who it's written for. That's why nobody else can understand what the heck's going on. What you are going to hear is what you're supposed to hear, which is, let's follow the king. And let's get started.
So, we are going to war.
Welcome back. Okay. Again, I say, pull up a chair. You guys, this is where Luke 6, we're going to go into David's bread. We last left off where sort of looking at Luke 6, and we did wheat, barley, all that. We got to the showbread with David, or the bread of the presence. And we're going to dig in a little bit deeper there, because that scene of David in the bread of the presence is what Jesus is referring to in Luke 6, right? So we're going to zone in there. And that is right in the middle of David going after the Ark of the Covenant to restore that. So what you're about to just get a pencil and notebook, you guys, because this is another one. and we're just going to blame Oz. That's what we're going to do. We're going to blame Oz, because I wanted to just do that little scene from David, right? And explain that he's restoring the ark and reclaiming that. And Oz says, well, if you do that, you probably should explain why the ark has to be reclaimed to begin with. And I said, okay, yeah, that's good. Because we've got to, because, Shiloh fell. And he says, well, if you're going to do that, you might want to talk about why Shiloh fell, which means you have to talk about Joshua and Eli. And if you talk about Joshua, well, then you're going to have to go back to where we left them in Psalm 78 and audit Joshua, Caleb, which might as well throw in Salmon and Boaz while you're at it. So guys, we're going today. We have more than 80, or I think it's 79 slides to cover today. And because we are such a very swanky, professional operation going over here with, I'm on a creaky daybed, and our online video editor maker that's free only lets us do 2 hours. But I don't want to go too fast. But again, warning, this is Oz's fault. This is what he does to me when I just want to take a snapshot and go back. And he's like, no, if we're going back, we're going to go all the way back so that people understand the full context. So we are going to throw a lot of names, places, and verses at you, right? But we're really against just throwing verses out of context. So everything always comes back around. We're going to spiral that curriculum, because it's our premise that if our framework holds, it can't just hold somewhere. It has to hold everywhere. So although we won't get every single spot in reference today, we're going to get a lot of them and add to our framework and layer that in. And hopefully you'll get a lot of background knowledge. You'll learn a nugget or two or new information, which will help to put everything in context when we finally zero in on David reclaiming the ark after Shiloh fell and taking that bread of the presence. Let's hope we get there. Let's hope we get there. See how Luke 6 and our Meet David Psalm 78 Babylon Fuckery Psalm, where we kind of left that hanging, these two are going to converge. So we're going to pull some pins today and give you a whole bunch of new pins. And let's get started. So we've got the Ark and the Fall of Shiloh, part 1. And I don't know how many parts there's going to be on this. But when we get back here, we're going to lay out the sequence of this briefly. Then we're going to take them step by step and piece by piece And we're going to start today with Shiloh era audits, sort of Shiloh-ish era. And we're going to audit the phrase God's chosen people, the promised land. We're going to take a look at Joshua and Caleb and Salmon and Boaz. And that's going to lead us to a genealogy of the king that we are going to present today. Because it's one thing to say, well, they jankified the genealogies. Can you reconstruct it? Let's find out. Well, we report, you decide. Let's go. That's our motto for this session. We report, you decide. And here we go. So the first thing we want to get out of the way is the Ark of the Covenant was not just a magic box that God lived in. It was a covenant symbol. It was God's footstool, if you will. Okay. It symbolizes his presence and the covenant. All right. And this is important because in the ancient religions, in the janky pagan religions all around, it was believed that the gods came down and inhabited the temples, right? Or, they would pull them down into these confined places. And sometimes they lived on Mount Olympus and they summoned them into the temple or into the confined space to make those covenants. That's not really what this is. Okay, this is a covenant symbol in the seat of God, marking his presence and the covenant of his people. And there's a guy named Eli, and we'll talk about Eli a little more. But Eli had some janky ass sons, and Eli was janky himself to some extent. And these guys dragged this Ark of the Covenant into a battle, but God didn't hitch a ride because God's not bound to ritual breaches. So we're going to take a look at that. They were sort of using it as a get out of jail free card or a ritual item. That's like, oh, well, we'll just bring this with us and win the battle. But they were far out of covenant. And that was a big problem. And the whole unwinding of the covenant at Shiloh. So let's dig into that. So we've got this phrase that everyone loves to throw around called God's chosen people. And we're just going to go ahead and rip the rose-colored glasses off for that phrase, okay? Because when people say God's chosen people, it's like all magical and sparkly and perfect and holy. And no. Take off the glasses, okay? Because God basically says through this whole biblical text, okay, Israel, meaning Jacob, Israel, you are my case study for all of humanity. Smile, because I'm about to use you guys as Exhibit A of humanity's everlasting dipshittery. And yes, it's all going on the record. So that's a little more realistic view of God's chosen people because they screwed it up royally, all of them. There is no exception, except, of course, our Ephrathite remnant. So let's go. We're going to do an audit of this chosen people status. So in Genesis 12, Abraham was chosen and God's spotlight gets turned on. And Exodus symbolizes Israel being freed, but they immediately faceplant with a golden calf. In the Judges, we have cycle after cycle after cycle of rebellion, collapse, rescue, rinse, and repeat. By the time Kings comes along, we've got King Saul's jankified rulership. David is our exception. Then we go straight to Solomon, who's golden hooker drunk, and the whole rest of the Bible is one collapse after the other of all tribes. Our prophets are running about in between, giving constant, you're screwing up broadcasts. But of course, nobody listens. And then we finally get to the New Testament. We're in the middle of Luke 6. And Jesus looks at the jankified priesthood as he's standing there, moving through the barley fields, right? Points back and says, have you not read what David did? Like, you guys don't even know your own Bible, do you? You don't even know your own story. And Exhibit A of human dipshittery continues. That there you go. There's your Bible translation, guys. That's all you need to know. Here we go. That's the shorthand version. That's the Cliff's Notes for you. So our ark is our presence. It's not a symbol. It's not this, icon or idol, if you will. It's a throne. It's not a containment box for God. It's designed as a testimony of covenant, not a cage for God. God says, I will meet you above the mercy seat. This is a relational thing, not a mechanical, ritualized thing. But unfortunately, Israel often treated it like a ritual weapon to carry off and guarantee their blessings, survival, and victory in war. But God never promised to ride shotgun, no matter what. In other words, God isn't chained to the ark. He might be there, or he might not. And we're going to see that a little bit. So the fall of Shiloh. If we remember all the way back in Meet Ephraim, we know that the region of Shiloh is a very important covenant spot, and that is in the turf that the tribe of Ephraim, the larger northern tribe of Ephraim, controls. So we're going to take a look at Joshua with Shiloh. We're going to share this tab instead. And all this is doing right now, all we're showing you right now, is that we're not going deep here, okay? They've crossed over into the promised land, and the whole people of Israel assembled at Shiloh and set up the tent of meeting there. They lay subdued. The land lay subdued before them. Now, this is Joshua 18. For background knowledge, all of Joshua 17 is basically Ephraim and Manasseh talking about what land they're going to get. Okay. And then other tribes that took land on the other side, okay, of the river. And then we've got 7 tribes left, I think. Yes. 7 tribes whose inheritance had not yet been appointed. So they haven't gotten their land yet. So Joshua's going to cast lots, and they're going to divide up the rest of the land and figure out what tribe gets what area. And that's what you're seeing going on here. Okay. So this is right in the middle of the land scene. But so we know, the whole congregation assembled at Shiloh and set up the tent of the meeting there. So Shiloh is our main site right now in this time period. Okay, there ain't no Jerusalem happening. Share this tab instead. But then we have a battle of Aphek, and that's in 1 Samuel. And we're going to run over here. And this is where we have a problem. So we're doing our stuff, okay? We're doing our stuff. Way in the future, okay? Way in the future. And the Philistines, but before David, after Joshua, okay? There's a big time period there. But we've got Philistines capturing the ark. Okay, this starts off with the word of Samuel came to all Israel. Well, what is the word of Samuel that was spoken to all Israel? This is basically that Samuel said, okay, Samuel said, the Lord called Samuel as a prophet, okay, and he's ministering in the presence of Eli. Now, Eli is both a judge and a priest. There is no separation of church and state back in the day. So your judges were sort of your tribal elders or your rulers. And all of the laws of the people were based on religion. I need you guys to think, Puritans, Quakers, Shakers, Amish, or where I was, Saudi Arabia. where there is no difference between church and state. So Eli is our big church and state guy. And Eli happens to have, so he's a judge and a priest. He is from the tribe of Levi. So he's a Levite priest and also a judge. Now, Samuel is dealing with Eli, and Eli's got two janky ass sons. And Eli says, tell me what God is showing you. And Samuel's like, no, you don't really want to hear this. And he's like, tell me. And Shiloh goes, basically, all your shit's getting torn down. Okay. I swear to the house of Eli that the iniquity, your janky ass shit, shall not be atoned for. So that's what's happening. Okay. And all of Israel from Dan to Beersheba knew that Samuel was established as a prophet of the Lord. And the Lord appeared again at Shiloh, because the Lord revealed himself to Samuel at Shiloh by the word of the Lord. So he's hearing them there at Shiloh. And the word of Samuel went out to all of Israel from Shiloh. That's what's happening here. Okay. So Eli is about to go down. Eli's janky ass sons are about to go down. So Israel went out to battle against the Philistines. They camped at Ebenezer, and the Philistines camped at Aphek. The Philistines drew up in line against Israel. And when the battle spread, Israel was defeated before the Philistines, who killed about 4,000 men on the field of battle. But it gets worse. They kill more than that later on. When the people came to the camp, the elders of Israel said, why has God defeated us today before the Philistines? I know. Let's bring the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord here from Shiloh, so it can come among us and save us from the power of our enemies. So they're using it basically as a talisman to ward off their enemies. But the whole community has been corrupted because of Eli's wicked leadership. This isn't just Eli was a bad priest. You have to understand at this time, we don't have kings, right? There's no government structure. We've got tribal heads, and church and state is not separate. So Eli's the guy, and all of his corruption is having an impact on the whole of the people, if that makes sense. It's lawlessness, basically. And it's not just lawlessness, guys. It's blasphemous, idolatrous lawlessness going on at the time. So they're like, well, I don't care. Let's just go grab the ark and that'll fix it. So the people sent to Shiloh and brought from there the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord of hosts, who's enthroned on the cherubim. And the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were there with the Ark of the Covenant of God. Okay. We're sort of going to skip ahead here. We'll get back to it. But, yeah, they ran from the battle lines. So they're all running out into battle. They face off with the Philistines again with the ark. And a man of Benjamin ran from the front lines and came back to Shiloh that same day. And his clothes were torn and he has dirt on his head. He's in mourning. He's freaking the fuck out is what that means. And when he arrived, Eli was sitting on his seat by the road because his heart trembled for the ark of God. He's all nervous. When the man came into the city and told the news, all the city cried out because Eli heard the outcry and said, what's this uproar? And the man ran over and told Eli, but Eli was 98 years old and his eyes were so set that he couldn't even see. And he said, well, I came from the battle and I fled from the battle today. And Eli says, how'd it go? How'd it go with the ark? And he brought the news, said, Israel has fled before the Philistines. There's been a great defeat among the people. Your two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead. And the ark of God has been captured. As soon as he mentioned the ark of God has been captured, Eli, the wicked priest and judge, fell over backwards from his seat by the side of the gate broke his neck and died because he was old and heavy. He had judged Israel for 40 years of corruption. The daughter-in-law, the wife of Phinehas, was pregnant, about to get birth. She heard the news, and that her father-in-law was dead, and the brothers were dead, and she gave birth. She had a son, and she named the son Ichabod, saying, the glory has departed from Israel, because the ark had been captured. And because it was captured because of her father-in-law and her husband, because they were so wicked. And we'll find out in a little bit what they did that was so wicked to cause the entire fall of Shiloh. So this is where Shiloh collapses and the ark is taken. And we've got, I don't know, what was it? 34,000 are slaughtered. And like the priest, like, oh, well, you know, Eli was a bad priest. No, he was a nightmare. He was a nightmare. So we've got Israel loses 34,000 men. The ark was captured. Eli and both his sons die. There is absolutely zero divine intervention. There's no miraculous story. Why not? God wasn't present in the ritual breach. He just didn't show, guys, because of the wickedness that had fallen on the land under the leadership of Eli. So, again, we see that God's presence is evidence of covenant alignment. God shows up when you're in covenant obedience, not belief, not ritual manipulation, neither of those. The ark without obedience is just an empty box. The ark with corruption is a jurisdictional collapse. And this is why, if you understand this is why the Philistines could just carry off the ark, right? If God was present in the ark, the Philistines couldn't be carrying it off, okay? They threw it on a cart and they ran off with it. They weren't fighting God. They were just transporting furniture because God wasn't there to begin with. So your priesthood fog theology says God rides the ark into battle. Well, not this time. So God wasn't there. God wasn't there. God wasn't there. That just gives you an idea of the overview of the fall of Shiloh. So first we've got our Shiloh era, and this kind of takes us, from Joshua to Eli. We're going to go to Joshua 18:1. Okay, so we're going to go back hundreds of years. And this is where the tabernacle is set up at Shiloh after they crossed into the promised land and went through the conquest of Canaan. Now, if you're in our private study group, you know that we separate the tabernacle and the temple. And this is how we think of it, guys. It's really silly. But the tabernacle was a mobile temple out in the desert. So when they're out in the desert with Moses on the road trip from hell, okay, they're moving around with the tabernacle because they're being nomadic. So the temple has to move, right? It can't be stationary. Well, that moving temple is called the tabernacle. So what we do is we just say the RV, because we've got an RV out in the desert. It's got all the things that you need at home, but it's not really a home. It's an RV. It's a really swanky RV. And then we've got a temple later with Solomon, and that's the house. So the tabernacle's our RV. And in Joshua 18:1, we see that tabernacle was set up at Shiloh after the conquest of Canaan. And that's the piece that we just read. So we already did Joshua 18:1, where it says he lands it in Shiloh and he's dividing up that land. So Shiloh in Ephraim territory becomes a central worship site for centuries. That's where it all starts. But we've got a bunch of audits here. And the first thing we're going to audit is Abrahamic Covenant being, quote unquote, everlasting land. We're going to look there. The claim is that this land of the Abrahamic Covenant is an unconditional and seed-based lineage claim. They claim The Abrahamic Covenant gives everlasting land forever and ever. Even now, in 2024, we're still frickin' arguing about this over the Middle East because it's quote unquote unconditional. And it goes to a certain seed of people, and that's their claim. So first of all, where does this whole Abrahamic Covenant land promise originate to begin with? Well, Genesis 12, 15, 17, and a little bit in 13, and we might throw that in today too. But in Genesis 12, God tells Abram, who later becomes Abraham when he crosses over, to leave his homeland and go, and he promises him land, descendants, and blessing. Those are the three pieces of our Abrahamic covenant. Now, where is Abram leaving? Ding, ding, ding. Damascus area, Aram. He's taking him out of Aram. If you've been watching our series, I'm not even going to pontificate on that, okay? Abram is leaving Aram and coming down from that waffle zone, and God's plucking him out, and he's Hebrewing over, crossing over, name change to Abraham. That's Genesis 12. In Genesis 15, he, quote unquote, cuts a covenant with Abram, promising descendants land from the Nile to the Euphrates, okay? From the land to the sea, Greater Israel Project. That's where this is coming from. We're going to take a really close look at Genesis 15 claims today. We've also got Genesis 17, where God promises Abraham and his offspring, quote unquote, the whole land of Canaan as an everlasting possession. So these three are generally interchangeably thrown at you as the textual root of this whole idea of the promised land. And we're going to let you decide if that holds up or not today. We don't think it does over here, but you know, well, our covenant doesn't run on belief, so believe whatever you want. As long as those beliefs don't pull you out of covenant. Here we go. Let's take a look at the land claim in Genesis 12. I told you, get a notebook. We're going, and we're going fast. Now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country, which is Aram, Damascus area. You'll see that in here. And your kindred and your father's house to the land I will show you. And I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing, basically to everyone. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you, I will curse. And in you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So Abram went, as the Lord told him, and Lot, who's Abram's nephew, by the way, went right along with him because Lot's dad had died. Okay, so Abram's kind of got his nephew here. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Now, Haran, right here, this word, this is not only a person, but it is a place. Okay, so Haran is the name of Lot's father, Abram's brother, who died, which is why Abram's got Lot. So it kind of gets confusing because sometimes Haran is a name and sometimes Haran is a place. So he's departed from the place, and Abram took Sarah, his wife, and Lot, his brother's son, and all the possessions and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out to go to the land of Canaan. When they came to the land, Abram passed through the land to the place at Shechem. We talked about Shechem before. Go back to meet Ephraim. Okay, so we're in Shechem. We know where Shechem is, right? Shechem is not in Judah, remember? And at the time, the Canaanites were in the land. And the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring I'll give this land. So he built an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. And from there, he moved to the hill country on the east of Bethel. There we are again. And pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and called upon the name of the Lord. And then he journeyed on, still going towards the Negeb, which is south. But the first place he talked to God and pitched his tent was up there in Bethel and Shechem, which we know is Ephraim territory. So did Ephraim get that territory in the Abrahamic Covenant, right? When they came across? No, they got the place down by Rachel. But it's interesting, right? By Rachel's burial site, they got that little slice in Genesis 48. But here, Abraham is in Shechem and Bethel, all the way back, Meet Ephraim series. And this is where he's saying, I will give you this land. So he built an altar to the Lord. Sounds good so far. Nothing janky. Let's move along to Genesis 15. We have another land audit. Now, Genesis 15 is where it lists a massive land grant. This is where we're getting from the river of Egypt to the Euphrates. It sounds expansive, but to this day, this promise of God has never been historically realized. It never happened, guys. All the way from Genesis, all the way through the last days that Peter was standing in. All that time. Okay, remember when Peter said, we're in the last days that Joel spoke about? He said it right in the book of Acts. So, in all that time, in all of this era, if you will, this never happened. Something's wrong with Genesis 15 because this should have happened, but it didn't. So we're going to audit Genesis 15 because I have some questions. So I read it in the Greek and, oh, well, there, the questions were answered for me. So if you go to that Genesis 48 that we've talked about 1,000 times, Jacob gives Ephraim and Manasseh the inheritance that's tied to Rachel's burial site at Ephrath in Bethlehem. So we've got a weird contradiction here with the land. Our claim, our premise, is that the actual covenant anchor is not Genesis 15. Okay? It matches Genesis 12, where they're operating in Shechem and Bethel, which is Ephraim. And the actual Abrahamic covenant anchor is Ephraimite land with Rachel's burial site, not the whole Egypt to Euphrates empire, because God is not an empire builder. He warns about that many, many times. We've also got a goofy, that's the first thing in Genesis 15. We've also got a goofy continuation protocol. Here's what I want you to listen for, okay? Especially when you read it in the Greek and you look a little bit at the Hebrew, what you're going to see is Genesis 15, 1 through 6, we've got a land deal between God. We've got a covenant between God and Abraham. And 15:6 says, and he, Abraham, believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness. This is exactly what James quotes, okay, later on in his letters. And so the language here, he believed the Lord, and it was counted him to righteousness, boom. That's a gavel moment, okay? That's a courtroom ruling. The verdict is logged, and the conversation is closed. Covenant clarity, belief, trusting God, righteousness, done. And then it picks up again in 15:7, the next verse. Opens the case again and says, and he said to him, I'm the Lord who brought you out of Ur. Well, when you audit the Hebrew and the Greek, this, and he said to him piece, it indicates grammatically or syntactically a new speech unit. So it's not like and is a conjunction going with the last sentence. This is like, and another time. Does that make sense? They're not together. This is a whole new thing. The book was closed in 15:6, and then the book is reopened in 15:7. Sort of like that old TV show Columbo, when Columbo turns around and he's like, and one more thing. It's very awkward, okay? And it's not a continuation of verse 6. This is a stitched in reset, and we just have to figure out, why is it there? So let's take a peek at Genesis 15 and see if we can come up with this land claim issue. Share this tab instead. Let's see what that reads like. All right, God's covenant with Abram. 15, 1 through 6. And then on 6, the gavel comes down, case closed. After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Fear not, Abram, I'm your shield, and your reward shall be great. But Abram said, well, what will you give me? I'm childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus. That's where Abram came down from. Okay, he came down from that Aram zone that we talked about in Paul's paganism series. Okay, he got pulled out of Aram, strangely, right at Damascus. But he doesn't have a child. So Eliezer here is not his son. What you would do was, if you did not have an heir, you would leave your estate to a servant of your household. Okay. And he goes, I don't know what you're going to give to me, dude. He goes, I don't have an heir. And the person who's going to inherit all my stuff is up in Damascus in the breach zone of Aram. I don't think the guy that pulled me out of Aram, the God that pulled me out of Aram, wants me to leave my shit to the dude in Aram. So what are you talking about here, God? And Abram said, behold, you've given me no offspring, God. I don't have any kids. And a member of my household will be my heir. Member of my household, not meaning kinsman, but meaning, this servant, Eliezer. I don't have any kids. And the word of the Lord came to him and said, this man shall not be your heir. We ain't giving your shit to any janky guy up in Aram. Your very own son will be your heir. And he brought him outside and said, look toward heaven and number the stars, if you're able to number them. So shall your offspring be. And he believed the Lord, and he counted it to him as righteousness. Done. Deal sealed. Case closed. Then the Greek and the Hebrew get a little janky, and it's like, and then the book reopened, and he said to him, I am the Lord who brought you from Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to possess. Not this guy, me. I'm the Lord. But he said, but how am I to know that I shall possess it? And this Lord said to him, bring me a heifer 3 years old, a female goat 3 years old, a ram 3 years old, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And he bought all these, cut them in half, and laid each half over against the other. But he didn't cut the birds in half. And when the birds of prey came down on the carcasses, Abram drove them away. Oh, you know what's going on, guys, by now, I hope, if you've been with me a while. Every time those janky-ass birds of prey are around, what's that telling us? Something just went south. Okay? Now the sun's going down, and a deep sleep fell on Abram, and behold, a dreadful and great darkness fell upon him. Why would a great and dreadful darkness fall upon him? Oh, maybe because he just did a ritual butchery up here. Okay. We have a legal breach loophole about sacrifice. Then the Lord said to Abram, know for certain that your offspring will be sojourners in a land that's not theirs. It will be servants there, and they will be afflicted for 400 years. And I'm going to bring judgment on the nation that they serve, and afterwards they'll come out with great possessions. As for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace, and you shall be buried in the good old age, and they'll come back here in the 4th generation, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. Now, hold on. Remember when we audited Exodus, and we had that dual voice thing in the Exodus? Well, when the sun had gone down and it was dark, behold, a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch passed between these pieces of chopped up animals. And on that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, to your offspring, I give this land. From the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, and the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. Now, hold on. Is this the same voice? I think we're dealing with another two-voice protocol like we saw with Moses in Exodus because of the janky wife protocol. Remember, Moses' wife did the priesthood ritual. Not only did she do the priesthood ritual because she didn't trust God, right? She did it on Moses. She didn't trust Moses as God. She wasn't in the same covenant as Moses with his God. She was from that priesthood line. And at the last second, she did a blood ritual on Moses. And he had that dual split now. He had that legal covenant breach vector where they're fighting for jurisdiction. Let's take a little closer look at that and see if that's just, crazy or maybe there's something to it. So he's coming out of Damascus, which we know over in Paul's paganisms. We're going to get back to that after we finish auditing this David part in Luke 6. We're going to take a break from Luke. Then we're going to go back over to Paul. I've got that one on the back burner right now, coming forward. But anyways, we've got Damascus and the Eliezer servant dude. And he said, is that line in 15:7, which is resetting in the Greek and Hebrew, saying, once that was over, now we're opening another book, right? We're opening case closed. Now we're reopening the case. That was in line 7. And this is where the land promise comes from. And this land promise that we just saw Abram go through reminds me a lot of Jesus on the cliff. When Hasatan comes to Jesus and says, just worship me and I will give you all of this. And doesn't open a legal loophole fighting over jurisdictional covenant law. Well, if you read it in Greek, the answer is yes. The Greek is so intensely ritual heavy, you guys, like a horror scene of dark covenant ritual language. So in Genesis 15, the word to cut apart that is used, this word comes up when Abram is cutting the animals in half, okay? This has such a strong ritual connotation that this verb is very uncomfortable for me to hear and read it in the Greek in this context. It really brings a darkness over the whole scene. And this is used in sacrificial contexts for dismembering victims. Okay. This is not covenant language. This is cultic slaughter. This is dismemberment. This is ritual butchery of both animals and humans. All right. And we've also got the word that means the sacrifice or the offering. Give me an offering and I will give you all of this land. Give me blood. Give me blood. Give me butchery. Do the cult slaughter practice and I'll give you all this. Now, the Hebrew is going to tell you, bring me a heifer, a goat, a ram. It's going to list all those. The Greek sort of echoes just this sacrificial offering piece, this dark offering. And these terms are really standard in any of your pagan temple ritual language. So the Septuagint really pushed himself. He leaned in to the mood here with his word choice. Greek has so many words. There's a lot of words they could have chosen, but they chose this one. And this is really giving you the connotation of that cult-like vocabulary. And it really makes the scene have a layer of darkness overlapped onto it. Well, this is literal ritual dismemberment. And this was seen as a way to release that life force or blood power to the deities. We talked about this last time. So to dismember, or this ritual butchery, if you will, while it can appear neutral in some contexts, it's historically associated with ritual dismemberment and sacrificial practices, including dark occult traditions where human sacrifice is performed. So we have to look at this, to be fair, we'd have to look at this in a neutral way and say, okay, it could be this really dark, yucky, dark occult ritual practice, but is there any other language surrounding this scene that would lead us to believe that it is dark? Well, yes, because it literally said in the text, it got dark and really yucky. Then we get our birds of prey. I tell you guys, every time the birds show up, that's a bad thing, okay? It's holding over and over and over. The birds are the bad ones. We talked about this last time too, and here we have birds descending on the carcasses. Like in Job, like Jesus referred to, this is all ritual pollution, satanic energy, okay, for lack of a better term. And in Greek texts, for these Greek cults, birds of prey are always symbolizing the demonic intrusion or ritual defilement of a doctrine, an area, a person, a landmass. When the birds show up, you're fucked. Remember, the birds are the ones taking the good seed. And Jesus said straight up when he explained the parable, the birds are the enemy. Okay. Birds aren't good. So we've got a breach. Okay. Rituals attract predators because that's the point of the blood ritual. It's to summon the demons, to summon the predators, to summon the other gods. They want the life force. That's why the blood, the blood, the blood. We've also got the darkness, right? And sometimes this is a ritual trance or some kind of underworld with the darkness falling upon him. So it's not covenant clarity, okay? This is, he's getting fogged in this darkness. He's getting consumed by the darkness, if you will. And also in Greek, we've got our covenant testament. And the covenant here isn't like, oh, you made a covenant with God, you made a promise, because this word is paired with our ritual butchery word. So the covenant and the butchery are being paired together. So this word could be neutral, but the context of our ritual sacrifice butchery is making it really dark when you're grafting those together. Okay, so we've got a split voice protocol with Abram. We've seen it with Moses. Now we're seeing it with Abraham. This one is the janky overlay. This is sacrificial theater grafted right on top of covenant clarity, and the same God is blamed for both or attributed to both. Now, the question is, did Abraham talk to this God and do the sacrifices? Or was this written in later by your ritual heavy priesthood that wrote the scrolls in the 400s? We don't know. We can't know, right? We don't know. But we've also got our goofy contradiction in Genesis 15 by what shall I know I will inherit it? This makes no sense. If it's the same conversation earlier, right? It literally said he believed and it was counted to righteousness. We've got a verdict. We've got a deal. We have a handshake. Verdict logged, done. And then in the very next sentence or two, he's demanding more proof. You don't need more proof. You already questioned him. But God, you haven't given me a son. How are you going to give me anything? I don't understand. He's questioning God in the first paragraph. And God goes, go out, look at the stars, trust me, it's going to happen. And Abraham goes, okay, deal. Why is he now reopening the case and demanding proof? Doesn't make sense. Then number 4, we've got all of our ritual with the heifer, the goats, the ram, the turtle, dove, the pigeon, or bring me sacrifice. Abraham does the ritual. Birds of prey descend. And we've got all this sacrificial stuff woven right into the story. And all blamed on the same God because they erased all the names of the gods and just made it all Lord. There you go. James quotes this exact scene. And James is quoting this scene when he's arguing that faith without works is dead. That's James' whole point when he quotes this. So what James actually says is, and the scripture was fulfilled that says, Abraham believed God, and it was counted as righteousness. He was called a friend of God. James, if you want to prove that you have to do something and not just believe something, because according to James, faith without doing something is dead, why wouldn't you point out the fact that Abraham ritually butchered a bunch of animals in the middle of the desert? He believed so much that he butchered all the animals. Like, why aren't you bringing that up? Wouldn't that be logical? No, you can't just believe. You have to do something. Like Abraham said, it counted him to righteousness, and then he went out and butchered all the animals. See, he had to do something. He followed God's instructions. No, James didn't say that. James stops here. And he believed him. They made a covenant. He was righteous. He doesn't drag the darkness and animal cutting ritual into his quote. But it would have been perfect for James to argue doing versus believing if he'd leaned in on the ritual in 15. But he didn't, because the scene is janky. And the birds of the air descended, and something went off the rails. And whatever went off the rails, that is the entity that promised Abraham from Egypt to the Euphrates. But instead, James pulled the clean covenant line, and he used Genesis 22 as the doing proof, which is a whole nother rabbit hole that we're not going down today. So James knew better than to say, and then Abraham killed a bunch of stuff and embraced the darkness. No, he didn't say that. He skipped that whole second part and went back to clarity and obedience. He said that this all reminded me of when the enemy met Jesus on the cliff and Satan tried to tempt him. And interestingly, Abraham comes from Damascus, which is exactly Baal-Hadad's impersonation corridor. This is Aram. This is the road to Damascus. This is where Abraham was coming from and where Paul was going to. So when preachers stand up there and say stuff like, whoa, the beginning of the book is just like the end of the book, but in reverse. Yeah, Abraham and Paul. The perfect Damascus Aram reversal with good old Baal-Hadad. This fits him perfectly. Do the ritual, and I'll give you the land. Jesus, the adversary, shows him all the kingdoms. All these I will give to you if you fall down and worship me. Same offer, jurisdiction through ritual worship. But the result with Jesus is he refused. He didn't give up any ritual consent because his covenant clarity preserved. So, Genesis 15, this land dispute protocol, we've got our covenant verdict sealed in 15:6. He believed the Lord, counted him to righteousness, case closed. Courtroom ruling, covenant clarity, verdict logged. And then the second voice comes in and reopens the case. This is our fog overlay. This is our Baal-Hadad corridor impersonation. Baal-Hadad impersonated Jesus on the road to Damascus. And Baal-Hadad impersonated God when Abram left Damascus, because they're fighting for jurisdiction. And it always leads back to Aram in Syria or Damascus, which is Baal-Hadad's stronghold. So we've got an empire. The result of this, literally thousands of years later, way more than 2,000, Our result is we've got an empire-sized land grant stitched right in from the river of Egypt to the Euphrates. Abraham was promised all the land. So the whole dispute that we're having, even in modern politics today, is about fulfilling that promise. But the Empire Land Clause was stitched in through ritual fog. The true covenant inheritance, like I've always said, is the Ephraimite land. The dark ritual created competing claims and has now fueled thousands of years of land disputes that continue with butchery and killing to this day. Tell me again, that's God. So in summary, we've got our Damascus corridor connection, which is Damascus, which is our Aram corridor we've talked about before, which is saturated with Baal-Hadal cults and ritual fog. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go on over to Paul's paganism. By naming Eliezer of Damascus, Abraham is acknowledging a potential heir tied to Aram's jurisdiction. That's the breach corridor reference. Abraham is covenant anchored, but he's saying, God, if I don't have a son, my entire estate defaults to Baal-Hadad's zone with Eliezer. This is a courtroom clause. He's invoking a legal heir outside of the covenant lineage, which opens the door for the other team to approach him. The text sets tension. Abraham's heir must come through the covenant with God, Sarah to Isaac, not through the Aram corridor proxy. So Eliezer's mention is dramatizing the risk of covenant inheritance being hijacked by a foreign jurisdiction of Baal-Hadad. That's what's happening in the text. But if you don't know the occult, you don't understand the richness of the text. So, is Genesis 15 really a massive land grant from quote unquote God from the river of Egypt to the Euphrates? Sounds expansive, but it was never realized. Genesis 48. So that's a promise of God that hasn't happened ever. So they say, because it wasn't a promise of God. It had them janky ass birds all over it. Darkness. And filled with slaughter. Genesis 48 is where the actual Abrahamic covenant gets handed down. The top of Genesis, 15, and then the Abrahamic covenant, Genesis 12, and it goes to Jacob, gives Ephraim and Manasseh inheritance tied to Rachel's burial site at Ephrath. That's your Abrahamic covenant, guys. That's your actual covenant anchor, which goes to Ephrathite land, not the whole of Egypt to Euphrates Empire. God is not an empire builder. But we've got one more. We got 17. Genesis 17 is another one. This is where the word everlasting comes into play, and they stitch the everlasting clause in. I will give you and your descendants land of Canaan as an everlasting possession, is what we're referring to here. And it sounds unconditional, okay? But the Bible itself, guys, keeps attaching obedience clauses everywhere. It's covenant language. It's not a blank check. You don't get a blank check if you're an asshole. That's not how God works. There's always keep the covenant. There's always obedience. It's always conditional. There is no such thing as an unconditional, no obedience, blank check. So when Abram was 29 years old, the Lord appeared and said, I am God Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless. If you walk before me and are blameless, meaning you follow my rules, then I can make a covenant between me and you and may multiply you greatly. Abram fell on his face. God said to him, behold, my covenant is with you, and you should be a father of multitude nations. No longer shall your name be called Abram, but you shall be called Abraham. Changes the name. For I've made you the father of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, Joseph, the fruitful one, and I will make you into nations, and kings shall come for you. Kings shall come from you. And I will establish my covenant between me, you, and your offspring after you throughout their generations for an everlasting covenant to be God to you and to your offspring after you. I'll give to you and your offspring after you the land of your sojourning, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. Well, God, what happens if you're not our God and we're not obedient to you, faithful in covenant as our God? What happens then? Oh, don't worry about it. Just keep the land? No, of course not. What's actually happening in the book of Joshua is in Joshua 13:21. All this land is being divided amongst the tribes by lot. Okay, by casting lots. We've talked about this before. Under Moses's earlier instructions. Our priest, Eleazar and Joshua, and the tribal leaders are overseeing all of this because, again, no separation of church and state. The Levites get no territory. They just get cities and pasture lands. This is a bureaucratic deed process. This isn't Abraham handing out covenant land. That happened in Genesis 48. Drives me bananas that we get this confused. The claim is that Abrahamic covenant land is forever, unconditional, and exclusive, but also Edom gets land. Excuse me? You never hear them say that part. Abrahamic covenant is forever, unconditional, and exclusive to a certain bloodline of people. So Edom gets some land. Why don't they ever say that part? Because that's what it was. And I'm going to show that to you now. This, guys, whole thing of it's forever, it's unconditional, not true, and it's exclusive is bullshit. This is covenant inconsistency, and Caleb's land proves Edom's graft, not Abrahamic inheritance. The land grab logic exposes itself right in the text. First of all, it's always been conditional, or they wouldn't have been expelled for disobedience. Seriously, guys, how are you going to tell me that these certain lineage of people get the land no matter what? It's theirs because God promised it. And it is unconditional. You don't have to obey. That what your story is, and you're sticking to it. So like a secular government can come in and just take the land. Thought it's had to be covenant obedience land. No, you don't have to obey. Yeah, you do, because every single time they didn't obey, their asses were kicked out. So explain that. So we know it's not unconditional. That's the first thing. And if it's not unconditional, well, it can't be forever. And we know the third claim is exclusive. Well, unfortunately, you guys fucked that up with Caleb. And let's take a look at that. So our audit of everlasting. Oh, it's an everlasting possession. No, it sounds unconditional, but yeah, it's everlasting. If you keep your everlasting covenant, like the frickin' Ephrathites did, then it is leading to Jesus. There's your everlasting possession. But covenant's always tied to walk before me and be blameless. If that's not enough for you, we've got Deuteronomy 28. Deuteronomy 28 happens to be when the second generation is crossing over into the promised land. Because all the people that left Egypt, they never made it. Dudes, they never crossed into the promised land. The people that left Egypt didn't cross over. They all died in the wilderness, and their children, the next generation, crossed over with Joshua and Caleb. That's it. That's all. Just them. And Moses gave them a big old long speech saying, hey guys, your fathers fucked it up. Your fathers didn't obey the rules. Please do better than your fathers, because when you step on that land, if you're not obedient, you're fucked, and you're not going to be able to stay in the land. That's the whole purpose of Deuteronomy 28, is here are your blessings, and if you fuck it up like your forefathers did, here are the curses. And in those curses, you will be shoved out all around the world to every land because you ain't going to be here. You get a one-way ticket to not fucking hear. That is in Genesis 28. So don't tell me that it's unconditional. The Sinai covenant is unconditional, and none of the land is unconditional. Okay? If I'm always your God, I'm always going to bless you with land, seed, and nation. Like this is what it is. Okay? It's not a blank check. So we have a Joshua-Moses handoff. And God tells Moses, go get your people in Exodus 32 when they had the golden calf, right? They're my people. Let me give you the rules for my people. It's always my people until they start worshiping the golden calf. And then God's like, yeah, never mind. Go get your people, Moses. Like he switches it. There's a handoff. It's funny. They're already failing covenant within minutes of Sinai. And what's God's reaction? Oh, that's okay if they're disobedient. Just give them everything anyway. No. He's like, go get your people, Moses. They're not mine anymore. It's ridiculous to think that this is an everlasting possession and you have to do shit. So Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Hosea, the land and the covenant is always forfeited through disobedience. And it's only restored through remnant faithfulness. So everlasting, that's signaling covenant continuity through the remnant, not uninterrupted possession through a bunch of dipshits that can't follow the rules. Okay, there's a big difference here, guys. Don't let them fool you. We've even seen this in our kingship covenant in 2 Samuel. We've talked about this one before, of if he commits iniquity, I'll discipline him with the rod of men. Our eternal throne promise is narrowed here when we see it through that narrow Davidic heir. It's still conditional on obedience. It always is. So the fog-backed priesthood is going to say, everlasting is an unconditional land deed. But the registry says, no, every single covenant promise is conditional. Land, kingship, identity, it all hinges on obedience and faithfulness to God. The everlasting language is covenant continuity, not blank check real estate. It means if you follow my covenant, that covenant's always there. You want to come back, prodigal son? The covenant's waiting. 2,000 years from now, you realize the priesthood's all fucking lied to you and you want to come back to the covenant, it's there waiting. The covenant's going to be eternally there for you. But that doesn't mean you get a free house. And that's our covenant contradiction in Deuteronomy 28. Okay, and we're going to take a peek at that because I recommend everybody in the covenant to go ahead and read Deuteronomy 28 because at the top, we've got all of our blessings for obedience. And this is what's being shared at Sinai. If you faithfully obey the voice of your Lord, be careful in doing all his commandments, you will be set high above all the nations of the earth and nations of peoples, right? And all these blessings shall come upon you and overtake you if you obey. Blessed you will be in the city, blessed in the field, blessed is the fruit of your womb, the fruit of your ground, and the fruit of your cattle. The increase of your herds and your flocks, blessed is your basket and eating bowl. You're just going to be blessed everywhere. Your enemies will rise up and be defeated. But, if you do not turn aside from any of the words I command you, to the right or the left, to go after other gods and serve them. But if you do, if you will not obey the voice and do all his commandments and statutes that I command you, then all of these curses will come upon and overtake you. Why? Is God cursing you? No, because you went after other gods and served them. And when, sir, you serve other gods, you open the door for them to come in and fuck with you. And here's what's going to happen. You guys ready? Here's what's going to happen. All these curses. Curse you be in the city, curse in the field, curses your basket, your eating bowl, curses the fruit of your womb. All of it. All of it. All of it. You'll get curses, confusion, and frustration, all that you do until you're destroyed and perish quickly on the account of the evil of your deeds. Because you've forsaken me. Lord will make the pestilence stick to you until he has consumed you off the land that you are entering to take possession of it. Excuse me? So then I guess the Abrahamic Covenant isn't everlasting. I guess the Abrahamic Covenant is only in play if you follow the rules, right? Does it say, except for the Abrahamic Covenant? No. No, guy. It's a ridiculous freaking argument from empire psychotic lunatic governments. That's what it is. Okay, share this tab instead. We also see this in Exodus 19. If you obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession. The land and identity are tied to obedience. In Leviticus, if you will not listen, I will set my face against you. Disobedience is exile and covenant breach. And we just saw our Deuteronomy 28. This is what happens if you follow the rules, and this is what happens if you don't. We've got some more Shiloh era audits. That's the first one. We got rid of the chosen people and we got rid of the promised land. But we've also got Hebron. The claim is that Hebron is the location of Abram's encounter with God when he crossed over. It all centers in Hebron. Well, let's just take a look at that, shall we? Because guess what? Hebron's in Judah. So they want Abraham's crossing over place where he meets with God. They want that in Judah. But here's the problem. It's not in Judah. Remember, we just talked about how Lot and Abram came down together from Damascus or Aram. Okay, because his dad died, Lot's dad died, so he's Abram's nephew. So they're there. They went up from Egypt, he and his wife and all they had, and Lot with them, and they went into the Negev. Okay, so they're cruising around and they're walking around. And Abram was rich in livestock, silver, and gold, and he journeyed on from the Negev as far as Bethel. So he's back up in the north again, to the place where his tent had been at the beginning. So they were traveling around, they did a bunch of stuff, and they came back up. Remember, we last left them in Bethel and Shechem and talked about this just a few minutes ago. Well, here they are again, going back up to the same place that his altar was made at first. And there, in other words, Bethel, Ephraim territory, Abram called on the name of the Lord. And Lot, who went with him, had flocks and herds and tents. So the land couldn't support both of them because their possessions were so great they couldn't be together. And there was a strife and blah, blah, blah. And journeyed east. This is just basically they're saying we can't both stay in the same place, which is Bethel. So Lot, you got to go. So Lot leaves, right? Lot leaves, and this is where he settled in Sodom, and the men of Sodom were wicked, and we get that story. But here's the interesting part. They're still in Bethel. Okay, Abram hasn't left Bethel yet. And the Lord said, after Lot left to go to Sodom, lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, north and south and east and west, everywhere you see, from the edges of the earth, from the edges of the heavens, all the land I'm going to give to you and your offspring forever. You're going to have it all, Abraham. Why? Because his seeds are going to multiply the earth. That's why. Okay? I'm going to make your offspring the dust of the earth, as the dust of the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, your offspring can also be counted. That's what he's saying. He's not saying you get all this land from this land boundary to that boundary. He's saying as far as you can see, man, it's all yours because your descendants are going to be that much. It's literally as big as the stars, as big as the sand of the earth. That's what he's saying. This is figurative language, guys. Okay. Arise, walk through the length and breadth of the land because it's all yours, the whole earth. So Abram moved his tent and came and settled by the oaks, which are at Hebron. When did he go to Hebron, guys, from this little short story here? Did he go to Hebron? And that's when God talked to him? Or did God talk to him about the land when he was in Bethel? It's not hard, guys. This isn't rocket science. No, God talked to him about all the land and the blessings again when he was in Bethel. Again, anchoring it in the Shiloh Ephraim region, not in Judah. Judah ain't got no shit to do with anything. God's not talking to him in Hebron, okay? God's talking to him in Bethel. Again, as usual. That's how it always works, guys. But for some reason, the priesthood wants you to believe that Hebron is the location of Abram's counter when he crossed over and had promises of God. That's his covenant anchor spot. No, what it is they never stop burying Ephraim land. That's what it is. It's the oldest trick in the priesthood playbook. Move the covenant promise, bury the patriarch south. Claim Judah owns the inheritance. That's what they keep doing. They keep rerouting it south, guys. So, Bethel versus Hebron. Verses 3 and 4, Abram returns to Bethel, revisits the altar that he built earlier, that we saw earlier today. And after Lot separates, God speaks, lift up your eyes, all the land and the sea, I will give it to you forever. You're going to have all these kids, so many that they will number the whole earth. He's talking in figurative language here about how vast his seed is going to be, just like he spoke earlier, that they're going to be as vast as the stars. They're going to be as vast as the grains of the sand, okay? That's what we're talking about here. That's the covenant promise of the vast land. Abraham moves south and settles in Hebron after that, okay, after the covenant conversation, not during. Sorry, Judah. All right, let's keep going because we've got more. While we're here in our Shiloh era audits, we've got another one. Why don't we talk a little more about Joshua and Caleb? Because this is going to tie up that sidebar we left hanging with Psalm 78, Babylonian clusterfuckery. So we're going to do a quick genealogy of Joshua and Caleb. And while we're there, we might as well throw in Solomon. And while we're there, we might as well throw in Boaz. So let's get started. Okay, Caleb's land. Let's click here and share this tab instead. Currently, we are in Joshua 14. Okay. I have such a headache, you guys. All right. So they're splitting up all this land. Okay. We're back with Joshua again. We've talked about this earlier today. We're kind of jumping around. So he's distributing all the land and doing it by law, and everyone's talking about where they're going to be. Okay. Well, Caleb comes rolling up, and this Caleb guy says, the people of Judah, so tribe of Judah, came to Joshua at Gilgal. And Caleb, the son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite, said to him, you know what the Lord said to Moses, the man of God, in the Kadesh Barnea concerning you and me. I was only 40 when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land. And I brought him word again as it was in my heart, but my brothers who went up with me made the heart of the people melt, and I wholly followed the Lord God. Moses swore on that day, saying, surely the land on which your foot has trodden shall be inheritance for you and your children forever. Moses said so, because you have wholly followed the Lord. So basically Caleb and all these people from Judah came up to Joshua and said, hey man, where's Caleb's land? We want Caleb to have land. Moses said so. So behold, the Lord kept me alive because I'm an old dude now. These 45 years since that time when Lord God talked to Moses while Israel walked in the wilderness. And now I am this day 85 years old. I'm still as strong today as I was in the day Moses sent me up. My strength is as strong as it was then for war and for going and coming. So give me this hill country, which the Lord spoke on that day. For you heard that on the day, how the Anakim were there with great fortified cities, yada, 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 yada. I shall drive them out, just as the Lord had said. And Joshua blessed him and gave Hebron to Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, for an inheritance. Therefore, Hebron became the inheritance of Caleb, the son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite, to this day, because he totally followed God of Israel. So, the name of Hebron formerly Kiriath Arba, and the land had rest from war. What the heck did we just read? Now, if you don't know the story of Joshua and Caleb, that might not have made any sense to you. But all I want you to get out of this paragraph right now is that the people of Judah came to Joshua. And Caleb, who's with the people of Judah, asked Joshua, "Where's my portion?" Because Moses said so. And then Joshua gave him Hebron. That's all I need you to get from here right now. All right? Caleb, with the people of Judah, asked Joshua for land because Moses said so. And so Joshua gave him Hebron. Hebron is the place we literally just talked about that they say is where the Abrahamic Covenant land was when Abraham met with God, but it isn't. Okay? This isn't the covenant place. The covenant place is Bethel. Okay? This is what they say is the covenant place, but it isn't. I know it's getting confusing. Welcome to fucking Judah. You're duplicitous, guys. I'm telling you. Judah's fucking wicked. Judah's fucking wicked. So that's the story of Caleb getting land. But what's going on here? Why does he get the land and who is Caleb? Well, Caleb was one of our spies. Okay? Way back in the day, when all the people were on the road trip from hell in the Exodus with Moses in the desert, they had not yet crossed into the promised land, and Joshua had not yet handed out any land. Okay? This is when they were all going to cross over, but before they crossed over, 12 spies go from the road trip from hell desert with Moses, and they go sneak out into Canaan. This is in Numbers 13:14. And these spies come back to say, "Hey, this is what the land looks like." Well, 10 of those spies give a negative report. And they say, "The land looks good, but the people are giants, so we can't take it from them. Fuck that, we're scared." But Caleb, who went out on behalf of the tribe of Judah, on behalf of Judah, said, "No, let's go now and occupy it. We're very able to overcome it. We can do it. Let's just rally the troops and go now." So Caleb was the first to speak, and he doesn't hedge. He says, "Let's go now." And this story often gets highlighted by preachers to praise Caleb and say, Caleb of Judah was the first one to trust God. All the other 10 tribes didn't trust God. Caleb from Judah trusted God and said, "Fuck those 10 people. They're a bunch of wussies. We have God. I trust God. Let's go now." That's the story that gets told about Caleb. Okay? And it's true. Sort of. But there's a little more information that you might be missing. Then after Caleb says this, Joshua steps up. Joshua's Ephraim lineage. And Joshua says, "Yeah, I agree. The land is exceedingly good. If the Lord delights in us, he'll bring us into the land. Don't worry about it. We got God. Don't rebel against God. Be obedient to God, and God will give us what God gives us." So Joshua doesn't throw a flag on the field. He doubles down with Caleb. So the only 2 guys out of all 12 spies to go and check out the land, the only 2 that said, "Let's trust God," are Caleb, who went on behalf of Judah, and our Ephraim heir, who is Joshua. Interesting, but it gets more interesting. Here's why. Caleb is called a Judahite from the tribe of Judah in Numbers 13 and other biblical texts. He's identified as Caleb, son of Jephunneh, and the representative for the tribe of Judah among the spies sent into Canaan. Although his father, Jephunneh, whatever, is described as a Kenizzite. Although his father is a Kenizzite, Caleb is fully integrated into and represents the tribes of Judah. Excuse me, what do you mean integrated into? Oh, well, there's a direct reference that states of the tribe of Judah, Caleb is the son of Jephunneh. So he's of the tribe of Judah, right? Joshua 14 mentions that Caleb was given the inheritance of Hebron. We just read that. And that's part of the tribal allotment of Judah. That's in their land. He came to him with Judah, right? Well, First Chronicles, our priestly book, where they wrote a bunch of shit in, that says that Caleb, son of Hezron, he's a Judahite patriarch. And First Samuel, this passage refers to Nabal, a man of ill repute, as a Calebite. Why would he refer to Nabal, a man of ill repute, as a Calebite? Wouldn't he just be a Judahite? Right. But Calebite means he's of the lineage of Caleb. So are we associating the name with the tribe of Judah, or are we associating the name with Calebite? I don't understand. Why are we integrated into representing the tribe of Judah? What's going on here? This is sort of fishy language, don't you think? Yeah, I think so. You know why? Because he's not fucking Judah. That's why. Caleb is a Kenizzite. Kenizzites are Edomites. These are descendants of Esau. Caleb is Edom. Caleb is Esau. He's an Edomite. Who are the Edomites? Oh, just the wicked twin brother that was going to chase Jacob down and kill him for the rest of their lives. Remember? There was this whole battle in the womb between Esau and Jacob. And Esau hates Jacob. And he's a evil motherfucker, according to God. And it said that for the rest of time, Esau will become Edom and always seek to kill Jacob. That's who Esau is. And Esau started the kingdom of the Edomites. Who else is Edomite? Oh, I don't know. Herods. The Herods. Ruling in the last days. Babylon. Those guys, Herod, they're Edomites. So Caleb joins in and kind of like sides up with Israel on the road trip from hell with Moses. He seems to stand faithful at Sinai. He goes with Joshua and the men to spy the land. He doesn't rebel against God. So his loyalty, according to the biblical text, earns him inheritance. So apparently, according to Judah and the Edomites in the Bible, you can earn your way into covenant. So then I guess it's not exclusive for the sons of Jacob. Because, I don't know, janky ass Caleb the Edomite earned his way into some land. Why can't I? I mean, if it's an everlasting possession, framed as exclusive to Abraham's seed through Isaac and Jacob to the 12 tribes, well, then the covenant inheritance is tied to a bloodline, not outsiders, particularly not from Esau or Edom, I would imagine. But no, he earned it. So which is it? I see a glaring contradiction right now. Caleb got Hebron. Why can't I have the piece? But this is Sinai participation, not Abrahamic inheritance through the line of Jacob. So we've got a logical collapse here. If Genesis 17 is literal, unconditional, and exclusive, well then Edom, Caleb, can't be grafted in Judah. And if Edom is grafted in, well, Genesis 17 isn't literal, unconditional, and exclusive. It would be expandable. It's one or the other. You can't have both. So now we've got an Edomite earning his way into the land. I guess, Joshua's just kind of standing there with the covenant, the Abrahamic covenant, all on his shoulders. He's the only one of the 12 tribes who went into the land, right? Because everybody else in the first generation with Moses died. Okay? He's the only one crossing over, the only one left standing, leading the whole second generation in. And the only one standing is the tribe of Ephraim, represented with Joshua. And he just happens to carry the entire Abrahamic Covenant from Genesis 48. But somehow, he forgot about the Jacob, Esau, Edom thing. And so he's just kind of standing there looking at Caleb going, well, everyone else is dead. Just me and, no, look, you, Esau. Huh, what a coincidence. Yeah, whatever. HR paperwork says you get Hebron. Sign here. That's what he did? Really? That's what you think he did? That's what you did. So Caleb must be really, really important, right? Yeah, not so much. He appears quickly in Numbers, and he's listed as one of the 12 spies, paired with Joshua as the faithful witness. He's identified as the Kenizzite. He receives Hebron as an inheritance. He's got a daughter, and then his line doesn't carry forward into kingship, priesthood, or prophetic prominence, or at least we don't hear about it, because after that there's silence. He just showed up in the text long enough to walk around with Joshua in that Abrahamic covenant, get some land, and well, he's not around anymore. So with all that in mind, we're going to go ahead and let you decide. Okay, we're going to let you decide on this one. Re-report, you decide. You've got two choices. Option one is the Ephraim facepalm. And this could be, because that's why we cast Keith Richards here, because Ephraim's a dipshit. So maybe Joshua, our Ephraim firstborn dipshit, went ahead and made the decision. And he just hands the anchor, quote unquote, which isn't really, we know it's really Bethel, but he hands it over to Caleb. He just gives him Hebron. Maybe that. Maybe he just did that, and they all call it, the covenant space. And then God's sitting up there with a cosmic facepalm, just going, well, yep, there's Ephraim, my firstborn dipshit, bungling the entire covenant geography. So, Ephraim's clarity was undermined by some kind of tactical blunder in true Ephraim style. Or option two, it's an Edomite splice coming out of the 4th century, where the corrupt priesthood, remember Maccabees, Hasmoneans, Herods, they all came in, got their hands on the text, and decided that Caleb, our Edomite, was just grafted into Judah, just adopted him, and he just got put right in there with Judah, and he gets this Hebron inheritance, moved over to justify an Edomite foothold in the land of Judah, which they then called Abraham's covenant place, but it wasn't. And Esau's just stitched right into the whole covenant geography and camouflaged as a faithful Judahite. So this would not be Judah's blunder, but a priestly edit to legitimize Edom's claim. In other words, the line of Judah just took over the land. Because who are they? Oh, they're Babylon. So here we have, literally, from the 12 tribes, only one of the first generation of the 12 tribes of Jacob wandering in the desert to see the promised land. Just him. Not even Moses crossed into the promised land. No other first generation tribe went into the promised land who were sons of Jacob, except Joshua of Ephraim. And supposedly, he's got Esau, Edom, crossing over with him, leading the entire second generation into the promised land. But the only son of Jacob, the only one of the 12 tribes would be Ephraim, represented with Joshua. And this is how important this guy is. Okay, this is how important he is. He got into the promised land that Moses didn't even get into, but somehow, well, his genealogy somehow got lost. Does that sound right to you? It didn't sound right to me, because in Numbers, we see he's a son of Nun, tribe of Ephraim. First Chronicles, well, his lineage is listed just like everyone else. but it ends with him. And then Joshua died. He's not buried with the patriarchs. No, no, no. He's buried up there in Ephraim territory. And he's got no recorded descendants. How strange. How strange. You think he's like, I'm the guy, the only first generation sons of Jacob that actually fucking made it to the promised land. And by the way, I carry all the Abrahamic covenants from Genesis 48, but fuck it. I'm not going to have any kids. Or this rich oral tradition is so important to the Jews post Babylon and Persia when they sat down to write chronicles that they remembered perfectly. Remember, they had supernatural remembering to write the book in their made up Hebrew language. They somehow just disappeared. We forgot. Anybody remember Joshua's kids? Nope, don't remember. Somehow got lost. Is that weird? Sounded weird to me. I wonder who they look at. And it's funny because Ephraim's almost last. He's just kind of thrown in there at the bottom. In these live the sons of Joseph. Excuse me? Well, who was Joshua's son? Didn't he have any sons? Nope, just him. That's it. Sorry, Joshua didn't have any descendants. That's too bad. Wonder who was first. Oh, of course, Levi. Oh, yeah. This Levi? Oh, Levi's descendants. Look, we have all these paragraphs. Oh, shit. Are you kidding me? We have a whole page of Levi. Look at all those. Can you imagine them keeping such perfect records about Levi? Thank goodness. Remember our friend Caleb? The son of Jephaniah? Isn't that the Caleb who came across with Ephraim? Yeah, look at that. He's a descendant of Judah now. Weird. We've also got the firstborn of Ephrathah, the father of, Bethlehem. Look at those guys. Those are all Judah too. Does this sound right to you? Why is this happening, guys? Isn't this weird? I'm telling you, Chronicles is a whole ass problem. But we're going to go ahead and share this tab instead because, I guess Joshua just let that Abrahamic covenant die with him. There it goes. There it goes. No children. Too bad, so sad. But interestingly, Ephraim never gets mentioned. Joshua's sort of, forgotten about. But you know who does get mentioned a lot? Rahab. And we're going to do the the salmon corruption protocol next. Because I think it's odd that this hooker, that helped the spies, and who were the spies? Oh, yeah, Joshua and Caleb. Remember them? They went out to spy the land. We had 10 guys from the tribes, and Caleb was representing Judah. Joshua's from Ephraim. Well, yeah, Rahab was the hooker that helped the spies when they went in and spied on the land. And she's mentioned a lot. She's actually mentioned a lot more than Joshua as the Bible progresses. And I thought that was weird. So in Joshua 2, Rahab shelters the spies. She hides them. And so her and her family are spared because she was a janky-ass hooker, the hoochie wife protocol, right? Where she was a hoochie wife, but, even though she was pagan hoochie girl, she adopted the covenant of the sons of Jacob. And in Hebrews, in the New Testament, it tells us by faith, Rahab the prostitute did not perish. Why? Well, because she was in the covenant. She adopted. She turned from her janky pagan hooker ways, just like Ruth, and she accepted the covenant. And James, Jesus's brother, brings up Rahab. So she must be really freaking important if James is talking about her, because, we love James over here. And she says, was Rahab the prostitute justified by works when she received the messengers or the spies? Apparently, Rahab's more important than Joshua. She's even listed in Jesus's genealogy as the wife of Salmon. Excuse me? Why would a woman be listed in the genealogy of Jesus? Because we know that the covenants don't pass through the women. The covenants pass through the men, right? So why would a pagan hooker be listed? Because she was faithful? I'm sure there are a lot of pagan wives that were faithful. Why this one? Sounded weird to me. Well, because she married Salmon, of course. Well, who the fuck is Salmon? Oh, I mean, he must be more important than Joshua. Well, of course, Salmon, the brave warrior of the tribe of Judah, marched beside Joshua right into Jericho. And when Rahab's eyes met Salmon's across the rubble, covenant sparks flew. Their union stitched the tribes together, birthing Boaz, the redeemer of Ruth, and anchoring David's Judahite lineage. That's what Salmon did. Here's the problem. I made that up. The Bible doesn't actually say any of that. What does the Bible say about Salmon? Well, nothing. This says nothing about Salmon. Nothing. Zero. There's no story. Salmon is nothing more than a name drop in a genealogy. Salmon has no backstory, no warrior credentials, no romance scene with Rahab. It's like they couldn't even be bothered to write the fan fiction of Salmon. He just shows up to marry a hooker. It ends up in Jesus's genealogy. He's only referenced in Ruth as being the father of Boaz. He's listed in Chronicles, of course, as being Judah genealogy. In Matthew, Salmon begat Boaz of Rahab. So we know it's Rahab's husband. And in Luke, Salmon is inserted into Jesus's genealogy. Who the hell is this guy? And why is his wife, the hooker, so important? So he's got no backstory. He's just ghost sperm, just standing in line with a hooker, being sperm, being good Judah sperm. That's all he is. He's a ghost entry. It's so bizarre, but yet Joshua has nothing? Funny enough, though, they always love to tell on themselves, don't they? The Joshua tradition in a Jewish midrash says that Rahab doesn't marry Salmon at all. The Jewish midrash says Rahab marries Joshua of Ephraim. Oh, so Matthew's genealogy, Rahab marrying Salmon, that's a ghost entry. Instead of Rahab marries Salmon, it should just say Joshua, Ephraim lineage. But you can't do that because Jesus is Judah, right? Uh-oh. I guess Salmon's a placeholder, a Judah sperm patch to redirect Rahab covenant marriage away from Ephraim Joshua. Oh, again, because that's what they fucking do. But that's not all. That's not all. But we know Boaz, right? Remember Boaz? We already talked about Boaz. We've already audited Boaz and that corruption. We actually did this in Ruth. So I want to remind you, we're not going to spend a lot of time on Boaz, but the Salmon protocol is done with Boaz too. And we did this over in Ruth in our Meet David series. Catch that, because there's this redemption law that says only a close relative of Elimelech clan could redeem his land and lineage. And Elimelech is explicitly called the Ephrathite of Bethlehem in Judah, but not of the tribe of Judah. That means it's the Ephraim remnant living in Judah territory, but it's not a Judahite tribe bloodline. So Boaz's qualification, if Boaz was Judah tribe, he would have no legal right to redeem Elimelech's inheritance. The redeemer must be from the same tribal bloodline. So if Elimelech is Ephraim, then Boaz has to be Ephraim, or he can't reclaim and redeem and marry Ruth and get the land from Elimelech. Boaz has to be an Ephrathite, an Ephraim remnant dwelling in Judah, just like Elimelech. Rachel's burial site is tied to all of this in Genesis 48, where Ephraim's inheritance is tied to Rachel's sons and her burial site in Bethlehem. And that anchors Ephraim remnant in Judah territory, but not of Judah's tribe. Boaz is able to redeem only because he shares Ephraim's lineage. So sometimes you'll get this priest-backed argument because they're desperate to keep Boaz as Judah. And they'll say, well, Boaz wasn't bound by the marriage law, but by the land redemption. That's why he could redeem the property, even if he wasn't Ephraim. They try to separate marriage to Ruth from the land redemption, claiming Boaz could buy the land, even if he was Judah. But no, sorry. We've got lots of problems with that. Ruth explicitly ties the redemption of the land and the marriage together. He is invoking the kinsman redeemer law. Problem number 2, Elimelech is called an Ephrathite of Bethlehem, Judah. It means Ephraim remnant in Judah territory. Only an Ephraimite relative could redeem the inheritance. And problem number 3, if Boaz was from tribal Judah, bloodline Judah, he has no legal right under either law. Both Levite marriage law and land redemption law require kinsmen within the same tribal bloodline. Wah. Sorry. So, we've got our edit with Salmon. We've got our edit with Boaz. Do we have any great Judahites that show up post-David? Where are all these great Judahites in Jesus's lineage? They're not there. They're not there. The only people in Jesus's lineage, in David's lineage, that claim to be Judah is everyone before David. The lineage, the genealogies after David, not a single person is referred to as explicitly Judah. Wrap your fucking head around that for a minute. So then, can we reconstruct the genealogy? Well, let's see. We're going to give you one to consider. It is 2025. No scholar that I'm aware of, that's why I have a little asterisk by no. I can't say no scholar, but no scholar I've ever heard of, and certainly no scholar in the mainstream, has ever attempted to reconstruct the genealogy using an Ephraim override, meaning Joshua is Salmon, according to Jewish Midrash and janky shit in the Bible, and Boaz is Ephraim in order to be a legitimate redeemer. Therefore, David is the Ephrathite Ephraim remnant. Nobody has reconstructed it to reflect those edits. Guess who's about to? Now, do we say this is accurate? This is the lineage of Jesus? No, I'm not that arrogant. But what I want to show you is how ridiculously fucking easy this is when you understand that Salmon doesn't exist. Salmon's Joshua. Okay? And when you realize Boaz is Ephraim, or he can't redeem anything in the book of Ruth. So just those two edits, rerouting the genealogy becomes ridiculously simple. And that's what we're going to try to do today. Because most PhD scholars, they stick to reconciling, Matthew and Luke's genealogies are different. Or they spend all their time writing apologetics to defend a Judah-centric reading and worldview. Boy, are they clinging to the Lion of Judah thing. Now, there are researchers who've noticed these oddities, like, Salmon's kind of mysterious. It's weird that Rahab's grafted in out of nowhere. And all the contradictions between Solomon's lineage and Nathan's lineage and Matthew and Luke. And some scholars have been brave enough to suggest redaction or political motives behind the Judah emphasis and edits. Here's your Davidic Ephrathite king. From Adam to Abraham. Genesis 5 and 11 gives a long chain. Adam, Seth, Noah, Shem, Abraham. This part is relatively intact, but it's stylized with round numbers, lifespans, generations. They disagree across texts. But pretty much, it's pretty solid. Then you go Abraham, Jacob, Ephraim. So our Genesis 48 overrides Manasseh, giving Ephraim the covenant blessing. All of the fog and lies begin right here, because the later texts that we've looked at, for example, Psalm 78, try to minimize Ephraim's role to elevate Judah instead. So this is where the problem lies. The problem is Judah didn't get the covenant, Ephraim did. The other problem is Levite priesthood didn't get the covenant, Ephraim did. They don't want you to know that. That's the problem. Also, the janky-ass Edomites didn't get the covenant. Now, if you take Ephraim to Joshua, Nun's son, Joshua's lineage is clear in Numbers, straight from Ephraim. Well, then we follow this supposed Salmon's line, and what do we get? We get Salmon to Boaz, to Obed, to Jesse, to David. Oh, look, all Ephraim. We have Joshua, Boaz the Redeemer for the Ephraim line, Obed, Jesse, David. Very clean, very easy. Then we have David to Nathan, not through Solomon. Just like Luke 3 traces Jesus straight through Nathan. And Nathan's line, oddly, completely bypasses priesthood and temple bullshit. It also avoids empire building via Solomon logic and all that janky-ass demonic stuff he was involved in. Then we go straight from Joseph as a biological, patriarchal, natural father of Jesus. Runs Adam, Ephraim, Joshua, who married Rahab, to Boaz, the Ephraim redeemer of Elimelech, the Ephraimite, to David, who's the Ephraim remnant called the Ephrathite, living in Judah, near Rachel's burial site. And David, through Nathan, not the janky-ass Solomon that God said, fuck this shit, I'm pulling it down, you're an asshole. Not that guy, no. Nathan. Straight to Joseph and straight to Jesus. So when we got to this point and saw how clean it was and easy it was with just those two switches, there must be someone between David and Joseph, that, or David and Jesus, that claims they're a strong Judahite stock. Well, guess what? There isn't. The only, did I say only? Only Judah tribe specific names in the genealogies are Judah, Perez, their son, Zerah, the twin, and Hezron. Dog-backed priesthood and scholars say Jesus is Judah's lion and he's David's son through Solomon by a Mary. We know Judah's the cub who is usurped and blocked by Babylon until Shiloh comes. And boy, did that lion of Judah, the lion calling itself Judah, the lion of the tribe of Judah. It's not really the tribe of Judah because we know the lion's Babylon. Well, that started so early, guys. Babylon, Edom, Esau's takeover of Judah's identity started so early. We see it already with Caleb. Because your Davidic Ephrathite king, King Jesus is a scroll-backed heir, not a magical vibe dispenser. He's not handing out hugs and horoscopes. He's not a glittery, sparkle pants light being with a harp and a man bun. King Jesus is the override heir, the divine monarch through a patriarchal lineage to David with all authority, all covenants, and zero tolerance for corrupt and glamored nonsense from your rabbis, your priesthood, your preachers, and especially your scholars. And perhaps all of this is why the king very famously shall say, "Depart from me. I never knew you." And there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.